Welcome to the news for the week of 12 September 2020. Kandiru fish, office phishing attacks with a twist, Fancy Bear, Jinghua, data leaks, TikTok, Oracle, and big-eyed beans from Venus. All this and Jason Wood on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires discovery in depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery in Depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/Big ID.
All right, and now the news. A new phishing attack targets Office 365. I know it's a phishing attack, but listen, hang on. So this attack basically uses the API, which normally is used to cross-check the credentials of users. So this is that screen you get when you go to Office 365 that says log in. So there's an API that goes and reaches out to Microsoft and validates all this stuff. So these guys were able to access the API when it was in use. So the attacker was able to create an intelligent response to the credential query rather than just another dumb phishing attack. And so basically what happened was that this was an attack from the wild. They said it was an unnamed company who had recently changed their domain, and the public email address was different from the domain that was used in the AD login. I don't think that had anything to do with the attack. I think it was more about like being able to send these phishing messages to people using their, these different domains. Basically, though, this let them interject an email that contained the string. So this was what it says: find enclosed payment remittance report as of 7/11/2020, and had a text file. So if you open the text in the browser, it pops up a Office 365 website that asks you to sign on. But here's the big difference in this and every other phishing attack that you've heard about forever. They were able to use the API to get the username. So they put the username in the login box. So bang, it pops up and says dwight at whatever. And that helped to sell it, I guess. So with that pre-entry of the username, it looks like a normal Office 365 login. And of course, as you might have guessed, that once they type that in, basically they own you and they get your password out of that little screen. So it's not really a vulnerability. It's more like the ability to make a more sophisticated phishing attack look real in real time. So that was sort of my take on that. But it is an interesting story. In the same light, APT28, or Fancy Bear, or Strontium, if you speak Microsoft, is apparently, and I know I did the story last week, but just a different story. So this is an update to that. Apparently heavily focused on Office 365 cracking and credential harvesting. Currently, all these attacks were really focused on the United States and the United Kingdom, and in particular on companies that were directly or indirectly involved in the upcoming U.S. elections. And of course, we all know that Fancy Bear / Strontium / APT28 is, of course, very likely affiliated with the Russian government. At least that's the claim. Now, last week, Microsoft stated that multiple actors were working very hard on companies involved in the elections and accused Iran and China, and everybody had their own side, and everybody's backing their own faction. Iran has denied this, China's denied this, and of course, what did you expect? But this is basically upping the ante again. So Microsoft reported that Fancy Bear had launched thousands of credential harvesting attacks against tens of thousands of Office 365 accounts. Just recently. So, as ever, I guess the point of all this is to ensure that your users are using MFA and unique passwords on their Office 365 accounts, because especially if you're in the election or campaign business. I don't do a lot of data leak stories anymore, but this was a big one this week, and I couldn't resist it. It's another reconfirmation that your data may be safe with you or at your company or in your organization, but, credential stuffing. So basically, 320 million dating and porn site records were leaked, not via the dating site, not via the porn site, but via a third party. So this third party is called Mailfire. And basically what they do is they sell marketing software to the dating and porn sites. And so they use that to collect information about the behavior of their consumers, and then I'm sure turn around and sell that data to somebody else. But Mailfire was collecting tons and tons of information about users of these sites. Certainly nothing new there. I mean, everybody does that kind of thing. They track your behavior on the site. They see what you look at, and then they sell that to ad targeting companies and so forth. Mailfire they lost 882 gigabytes, which contained 320 million different records. Lots of the sites that were impacted were, interestingly enough, scam sites already. So these were these sort of fake dating sites that, promise people stuff. They log in, they give up their credentials, or they give up other information to the site. And, of course, it's just a scam. So it was kind of a double hit for a lot of those people. Most of these sites that were involved were Lonely Hearts type sites that connected men with dates or with dates. But some were legit. And some were like premium international dating sites for niche destinations. The data contained all sorts of PII, messages, tokens, links, and emails. So again, try and figure out how to warn your users about using their corporate credentials on other sites and putting their PII information out on all sorts of other sites, and ensure that they know that no matter how safe they think something may be, that site may either be selling their data or letting somebody else track their data or letting other people act to get into the data, so that, even though you used MFA on your iHeartPrawn.com site, iHeartPrawn may be using other third parties to resell, harvest that information, and that may not be legit or secure, or they may be a total scam in the first place that has MFA, because why not? As long as we're talking about data leaks, we might as well also talk about Jinhua. Jinhua had been collecting data on just about everyone in the world, and has long been believed to be involved with the Chinese military and intelligence agencies in the People's Republic of China, despite claims to the contrary. The company basically scrapes, this is sort of according to the company and sort of according to the story. The company claims that they scrape data, and the story claims they scrape data, but they claim they only scrape very public stuff and they don't try to affiliate social media with individuals. But the article is claiming that they're actually going out, scraping Twitter, scraping Instagram, scraping Facebook, and then trying to figure out who those users actually are, mapping them back to data that they contain in the People's Republic of China. So the database that got leaked, and this was not a hack or anything, this was a literal leaking of this database to a person who then leaked it, contained over 2.4 million individuals that they had mapped to other people. And this was all from a Canberra, Australia-based company called Internet 2.0. And they said that they had gone through the data set and recovered 250,000 individual records that included 52,000 Americans, 35,000 Australians, and 10,000 Britons. Jinhua denied, of course, that they had leaked the data, and they also said they do not collect such data. And then they turned around and said, well, we collect it, but we don't map it. We just integrate it, but we don't integrate it with username. It's basically the same kind of thing. Basically, they denied that this larger database that was claimed even existed to reporters that asked about it. But an American named Christopher Balding apparently got the leaked database while he was working in Shenzhen in China. And then he returned to the U.S. due to security concerns, which I would guess he has when he's in possession of a leaked database that belongs to the Chinese military. So you might want to get on the next plane out, or maybe the next, cart or whatever you can get across the border. Jinhua said it was simply research that they had been collecting that connects individuals to social media. But Anne-Marie Brady, a professor at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch, New Zealand, said that this was the culmination of research by the Chinese Ministry of State Security, and that they traditionally collect as much information as possible about foreign economic and political elites, as well as any foreigners who have lived in China for any significant period of time. And they produce mountains of data about these people, which doesn't shock me a bit. It's a really interesting story, though, and it probably shouldn't come as any surprise to any of us. And honestly, I'm sure the United States and the United Kingdom do stuff like this as well, to collect data on foreign nationals in the United States and, figure out what they're up to. I mean, it's, standard stuff. If you have not heard, Microsoft lost out on the U.S. mandated order to buy TikTok. Instead, TikTok decided to make a deal with Oracle. Go figure. The Treasury Department is apparently planning to review this deal with Oracle prior to it being approved. ByteDance basically rebuffed Microsoft's offer and apparently just went ahead and took this deal from Oracle that would keep TikTok up and running in the United States after U.S. President Donald Trump said he would ban TikTok in the United States due to, well, I guess the Chinese. U.S. officials and the president have basically said that TikTok collects information and provides it to the Chinese government, despite TikTok claiming that they do not do this. Now, in my opinion, all sides in this, it's like, okay, wait, who, what? Of course they're going to deny it. But a pool of bidders emerged, which included Microsoft, Walmart, Oracle, and others who all sent bids to ByteDance to see if they would sell the U.S.-held part of TikTok to them. And they decided to go with Oracle. It's not really clear at this point what this deal actually is, how it would prevent TikTok from giving data to China, how the deal would actually work, how Oracle would manage TikTok, how they would control it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So welcome to the current state of U.S. politics. Trend Micro released a survey which revealed that 39% of the 13,000 or so remote workers that they polled in 27 countries indicated that they routinely use personal devices to access corporate data, and more than a third of these workers do not use even basic password protection on their personal devices. More than half the participants have IoT devices in their networks, and 70% of these workers are connecting corporate laptops to their home networks. I mean, this is basically confirmation of what I would call, what we all know already. I mean, think about it. The company gives you a 13-inch screen laptop that's 5 years old and says, go work at home, have fun. And you set your 13-inch laptop down next to your giant 6-screen home system, or with your 2 curved 47-inch, monitors and all your friendly devices that you like to use, and says, oh, no, you shouldn't use that. You should use this 13-inch screen to do all your work. I know which one I'm going to use. Not that happened to me. I'm completely in compliance, fellas. But I know what I want to do, and I could disconnect all my monitors and plug them all into the docking port so that I could read my corporate email, and then disconnect them all and put them back so that I can, watch whatever I was going to watch, HBO Max or something. But do you realize how many times a day I would have to switch back and forth between all the different jobs that I have? So I've got accounts for school, I've got accounts for Security Weekly, I've got accounts for my clients. It would be kind of crazy. So, yuck. I mean, it's not a big surprise. Remote work is making us reassess how to best do this stuff, but it's definitely a conversation you should probably be having with your security staff, or maybe you are the security staff, so you'd be having it with your employees. And don't even get me started on file sharing. Temple University in Philly has built out a tracking system for worldwide ransomware attacks on critical infrastructure, and say they will make the data repository available to anyone who wants it as a Microsoft Excel file, and they actually will do that. I went and checked. The data set includes the names of target organizations, when the attack occurred, the location, the sector, the duration, and the flavor of ransomware, as well as other stuff that they collected. They also have data on how much the ransoms were, the payment methods, how much was actually paid, did you actually get the data back. It was really, really cool service. I don't know how comprehensive it is because I don't know how many people responded, and I didn't dig through all that. They even link all this back to MITRE, so you can pull that together. And the site is called Critical Infrastructure Ransomware Attacks Repository. And it currently has 687 records contained inside of it. And the current summary they put on the top of it says that the most common target is government facilities, the most common family is maize, and the most common ransom was $50,000 or less in U.S. dollars. Definitely a nice research tool. I did put a link back to the Temple site on there, so you can check it out. Zoom has now rolled out two-factor authentication for all accounts as of 11 September. They support time-based one-time password protocol type setups, which is the ones you're kind of familiar with, and or SMS and phone calls, which is the other one that you're probably familiar with. If you want this to be set up, it should be a new option on your Zoom dashboard in the security/advanced section, which would allow this to be enabled. I would certainly suggest this is a good idea, but you may want to evaluate its impact on your users and their ability to actually do this. I encourage it, but not all organizations may be able to manage the rollout. I mean, think, like kindergartens and things like that. When we return, we will have expert commentary from none other than Jason Wood. So stick around after this short break.
The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM.
Returning from a long and sometimes incredibly painful search, he did manage to locate and capture, in quotes, a Candiru fish. The Vandellia cirrhosa fish is native to the Amazon basin and is famous for swimming up the urethras of those who venture into the waters in the jungle. Jason Wood joins us now to talk about a Russian hacker who's selling a how-to video on a 0-day for Magento. So, Jason.
Hey, Doug.
Hi.
Good to be back with you again. I'm sure I'm glad I managed to avoid getting infected with that fish.
Some people say it's a great experience.
I'm going to pass. I won't pass. So, yeah, as Doug said, we're kind of an interesting bit of activity on some of the e-crime fronts out there. This is actually one of the really interesting parts of what adversaries are up to and how they are acting online and working to make money off of what they do, is really this organization and how they go about and drumming up business. So obviously profiting off of hacking has been a motive for a long time. But this was an interesting story that I found on the Register, as well as a similar one on ThreatPost. The Register was, was a pretty good kind of overview of everything. ThreatPost had a few more technical details that were added in. But basically, the idea is some attacker out there realized, hey, I've got a 0-day for Magento 1, and Adobe no longer supports this. But a lot of people are still running it, which means there's no software updates. Short of upgrading to Magento 2, which is going to take a while because they have to pay, and it's bigger deal to do that type of update. So they decided, hey, there's an opportunity here, and they put together a video explaining how to use this 0-day exploit in Magento 1, and sell it to others. And I guess the thought here is they decided they could make more money by selling a lesson, basically, a training class on how to exploit this flaw, than actually go out and try and do it themselves and do all of the card skimming and whatnot. And basically, the idea behind the flaw is they're able to inject their card skimming code into the payment page on sites running Magento 1. So they went ahead and did that. They created a video on how to do the exploit, and then they put it up for sale for $5,000. Now you're like, holy cow, that's quite a price to get access to that. But they decided to play some economics with this and make it more valuable through scarcity. They said they'd only sell this exploit and the video, basically, access to it, to 10 people, and then they're done. So if you trust that, and if that's what happens, then this person is looking at a $50,000 payday, which is not bad because, I mean, if you have access, how much is it? Or you have the exploit, how much is it going to cost you in time and stuff like that to stand up a video? Probably not that much. Maybe a little write-up and some sample code, and you're off to the races. So the aspect I thought about that was interesting about this was the idea of manipulating the scarcity. They may have been able to make more than $50,000 than if they had sold it for maybe $1,000 or $500 and open it up to a much wider audience. I don't know. Or they just kept their customer base small, and just keep the price high. These are some of the decisions I guess anybody selling something online has to make when they're deciding how to price it, how how that's going to impact their audience. One of the possible results of this is that 2,000 sites running Magento 1 had their payment pages compromised and customer payments going off to a website in Moscow over the last weekend. Apparently, there's still plenty of upside out here. We've got another 95,000 sites running Magento 1. This is according to a company named Sansec Threat Intelligence. They're the ones who released the report around this and explained basically what they were observing and what was going on. Like I said, the Threat Post article has a little bit more technical information about it, about what's occurring. And there isn't enough here, if you're looking at the articles and what I was able to read, to definitely say that the spike in exploited Magento 1 servers is totally tied back to this video. But the timing is pretty dang coincidental if they aren't. So, it seems like there is a little bit of a tie here, at least intuitively. I suspect Sansec has a great deal more information that they said they've shared it with law enforcement, basically. But it's information that they couldn't or wouldn't release publicly. Which is something that I've learned kind of firsthand through my work, in my job, trying to figure out what you can release, what you shouldn't release, and whatnot is a little bit of an interesting dance, a bit of a tricky business. This is just one example of how criminal operations are making money off of e-crime without actually going out and doing the hacking themselves. There are others that I've read about and have learned of myself that I've dug into. Where they are doing things like ransomware as a service, or some kind of toolkit or something like that they're turning around and selling to people. It's kind of interesting because they have this notion of trusted affiliates that they have to sell it to because they don't want to sell it to law enforcement and get themselves arrested. Kind of odd there, but essentially you have to be vouched for by somebody who's already trusted by the seller of the service to get access to it. And then you can become an affiliate and you can do ransomware, and they'll provide the whole platform for you to do it. The ransomware, the payment system, communication, all of that stuff. You just have to go out and do the actual attacks. It's a pretty wild world to see how this is developed. I remember years back sitting in an IRC channel and listening to you guys talk about their experience running botnets and saying how they got out of it when organized crime got into it and all the fun went away at that point for them. But that's just kind of the evolution of what's happening. If you want to understand more about what you're defending against, I highly recommend you check this stuff out. It's really interesting to read. It's wild to see how they run this like a business and are always looking for ways to improve their revenues, improve their click-through rate, essentially on like ransomware payments, and get people to pay up. I just find this to be awesome reading, and I think you should check it out. I've got the links to the Register article as well as the Threat Post article in the show notes. Go ahead and check it out there.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, that's a really great story. I enjoyed reading that one as well. And it's certainly another argument for bug bounties and trying to encourage people to do the right thing through monetary compensation. But, I mean, it makes sense because if crime pays and doing good doesn't, guess which one people will often choose. So, great story. Thanks. And finally, scientists have found evidence of phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. It's not Planet of Blood yet. Great movie, by the way. But, well, given it's 2020, who knows what could happen next. Venus is one of the nastiest places in the solar system. And until recently, well, most everybody believed that it's not really the kind of place that anybody would want to live. But phosphine, which is a flammable gas, what else, is produced on Earth by anaerobic microbes, which are bacteria that live without oxygen. The paper, which was in Nature, which is an academic journal, doesn't mean and doesn't imply that killer vampire beetles that eat gasoline and fart toxins are going to be found in the attic of a mini mart in Tuscaloosa anytime soon, but who knows? Maybe Elon will build a settlement on Venus near the old Venera site, and we can all go looking for nasties in the wastes of Venus. Call me Elon. And that's the news for now. In the time of plague, I'm Doug White. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. I'll be back Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up, and I will tell you what conspiracies you need to believe.